This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
10th player to have his number retired: Casey Stengel, Gil Hodges, Tom Seaver, Mike Piazza, Jerry Kuzman, Keith Hernandez, Willie Mays. Last season, Doc Gooden, Darryl Strawberry. Second player in Mets history to get both honors in the same day, the one and only Tom Seaver. The franchise was the only other to do that. And July 19th, this will all go down. Pre-game ceremony before the Mets play the Cincinnati Reds at 4:10. What did you think about this news when it came out? Is this how you would have drawn it? I mean, first off, let's ask that question. What did you think, when you heard this news come out?
I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised that it happened, at all. I mean, I thought, I was thinking like they've been retiring numbers obviously at a pretty good clip, making up, I think, for lost time with last year with Doc and Darryl. Before that, with Keith Hernandez, with Jerry Kuzman a few years back. So, and then Willie Mays as well. But it was kind of like they've been doing it, and you kind of expect that. I don't want to say on an annual basis, you expect David Wright, it's going to happen eventually. I think they wanted to have enough separation between the time he retired after 2018 to kind of let his retirement breathe in a sense, to then give him that honor, kind of as like just a way to, like I said, a separation of space, but to also have the fans, a lot of people, pretty much all of us who saw him play in some respect, and some of us who saw him play at the very beginning when he came up in 2004 and his formative years, and 05, the end of Shea Stadium, 05, 06, 07, 08, to really give him the respect he deserves. So when I heard it, I was obviously very pleased, not surprised. Like I said, it was kind of, whoa, the end of the week, the end of the day after the Juan Soto press conference. It's like, this is, it's almost like they just wanted to, you thought you had a great week, Mets fans. Here's this.
When I look at how the Mets have handled since Cohen has really come aboard and handled all of the retirements and the Hall of Fame, I thought we were maybe about a year or two away from this. Maybe he would have went into the Hall of Fame this season, and then they would have pushed it to maybe a couple of years from now. They always do this thing where it's like 1 year it's Hall of Fame, 1 year it's retiring numbers. So I thought maybe they'd go Hall of Fame here, retire Gary Carter's number, maybe put someone else in the Hall of Fame the following year, and then, retire David Wright's number. But they're doing this all, within 1 year. Is this how you kind of would have drawn it up, and who is next in line in your eyes for these honors, or are we done for now?
No, so as far as drawing it up, I think doing the Hall of Fame and the retired number, I think that's a good way to do it, because I think if you put him in the Hall of Fame, then it's like, well, why wasn't his number retired? I think you kind of leave that, ambiguity there. People like going, well, why wasn't his number just retired? Why don't we just do both at once? So I think it made a lot of sense just to do both. I agree with you. Like, I would not have been, that upset if they had just done a Mets Hall of Fame and waited a year or two for David Wright. And to answer your second question, I think Gary Carter is next. I think when we're talking about things making sense with regards to Mets history, I think, we have Doc, we have Darryl, we have Keith. Gary Carter completes the set. I think I've said that before to you or someone else. It just makes too much sense to, like, we have all the three most important players, on-field participants on the 86 Mets who have their numbers retired. It just serves Gary Carter right to have that happen, from taking the emotion away from it, knowing that he's no longer with us. And it's just the kind of the player and person he was, taking that emotional aspect out of it. You look at his stats, he had really only 2 great years with the Mets. So if you want to take it from that perspective, you're like, oh, well, what was, 2 great years and you're going to retire his number. But I think Steve Cohen, as we have seen with, like, especially the Willie Mays number retirement and kind of honoring New York baseball, honoring Joan Payson, I think he is very understanding of the team's history and players that may not that may on the surface, like, okay, statistically, how do they measure up? But it's more about the impact and the impact on the team's history. And I think in that respect, I would expect to see Gary Carter's number retired. I'm not saying that's next year, but I would think in the foreseeable future.
I want to go over David Wright's career with you right here. 14 years in the majors. Obviously, the spinal stenosis cut it short, but 296 batting average, 242 homers, 970 RBIs, and 867 OPS, 49.2 WAR. He was on a trajectory to not only being in the Mets Hall of Fame and having his Mets number retired, but actually being in the Hall of Fame was a possibility. 7-time All-Star, 2-time Gold Glover, 2-time Silver Slugger, 2015 National League champion. To me, his best season, 2007, 2008 were his two best seasons statistically. But I think that 2007 season, I think he kind of got screwed out of being the MVP, losing it to Jimmy Rollins because the Mets kind of fell apart there. But 325 batting average, 30 homers, 34 stolen bases. So he's a 30-30 guy, 107 RBIs, and a 963 OPS. All-time leader in hits with 1,777, doubles 390, walks 762, RBIs 970, and runs scored 949. What was most impressive to you about David Wright's career?
I think it was just the kind of overall, as far as at the plate, just his overall balance. As you mentioned, 30-30 season in 2007, had, the power as far as like home runs, hit for average too as well. So he was just a very balanced player. And to me, like was a very kind of steady player. You mentioned 2007. I agree with you. That was his best season. And it's unfortunate that, as he kind of, as he stayed pretty steady, the rest of the team fell apart. I mean, and if you look at his splits, I'm looking at his Baseball Reference in 2007, he batted 352, had an OPS of 1.034 in the last month of the season. So he didn't really, falter. In fact, he got really better in the last couple months of the season.
Yeah, and we can't put any blame of those two collapses on David Wright's shoulder. I mean, he was outstanding.
Yeah, no, he was great. There was a lot of other factors that contributed to the Mets falling apart. We don't need to revisit that. But yeah, I just think that he was just so steady. You could count on him up until I think up until 2011 when I think he missed 2 months. You could count on him to be out there every day. I mean, he was an everyday player in every sense. And that's what made the second half of his career so, from a baseball sense, so tragic. That he just like really fell apart, and then the spinal stenosis on top of that. So yeah, the reliability and consistency was what I always think about when I think about David Wright.
I think to me as well, his return in 2015, we knew the injury was really starting to set in that season. Comes back in Philadelphia, hits a huge home run to help the Mets win. Then at the end of the season, the last game for the Mets to clinch in Cincinnati kind of really hits that exclamation point home run to send the Mets to the postseason. Obviously, the World Series home run, that's a big home run in his career. But, it would have been nice to get to see David finish his career out the way it should have been done, to at least give him the opportunity to be like, yeah, you know what? This is a guy that's going to go into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the very end, I mean, 2018 was great to see him out there, but it was certainly bittersweet. 2015 was, we had it was like the hamstring injury early in the year, and then that's when the spinal stenosis came out. And then, in July, the Mets got on, the late July, the Mets started to get on a roll. And it was wonderful to see him come back, a little diminished, but he did have those, as you mentioned, those great moments, that home run in Philadelphia in his first at bat. I remember I was at this game in DC, Labor Day, that series kind of against the Nationals, where it was, you never, were the Nationals going to catch up to the Mets? Were they not? Yoenis Cespedes hits a double in the gap in the 7th inning, and Wright goes from first to home and has that fist pump. I feel like he was unleashing not only the last few months of frustration of not being on the field, but but all those years of being with those, terrible Mets teams, he was just letting it all out. And I think of that moment, and you mentioned the home run in Cincinnati and that blowout, the NL East clincher, and then of course the home run in the World Series. So it was great to see that. I wish 2006 would have ended differently because he didn't have a great postseason, but he could have had a postseason moment, and at the time you're like, oh, he can get back there. We got time. You got him and Reyes as a core, and it just never happened. And 2015 was the closest we got, but it was a diminished David Wright.
Yeah, 2006, that one broke me.
Yeah.
That season broke me because I really thought from beginning to end, that was the best Mets all-around team, I thought, from beginning to end since I started watching it around 1998. And they went to the World Series in 2015. They went to the playoffs in 99, 2000. There was no team I thought that was better than that 2006. I really thought they were going to win the World Series. Like, I never had been so confident that they were going to win a World Series than for that year, that they were even better than 2002, which that they won the most games that I've ever saw in 2020, in 2022. But I never felt that way that I felt about that 2016, where they ran roughshod over everybody. And like we mentioned before, it's not David Wright's fault either that they didn't get to go to the playoffs in 2007 and 2008. He did everything possible to get them back there.
Yeah, and 2008, 33 home runs. He didn't. He only had 15 stolen bases, but he drove in 124 runs, which I think that tied Beltran's record. I can't even remember, or et cetera. I'm trying to remember what that where that ranks in Mets history. But yeah, 124 runs driven in, batted over 300 again, OPS plus of 142. I'm cheating because I'm looking at his Baseball Reference, so I do not have these memorized. But yeah, I mean, that was a great season too, and that was to a lesser extent an unfortunate September. So yeah, I mean, it's too bad it's too bad we never got to see him really, his peak and the Mets kind of peaking at the right time.
G Money Stacks bringing up a good moment. That amazing catch with his bare hand in San Diego. I think it was 2005. I think that was that happened. A great moment of him making that catch. He made some incredible catches jumping into the stands as well. What are some of your favorite moments from David Wright?
Yeah, I mean, I think that catch was his first full season. I think of his walk-off against the Yankees in 2006, where he hit that ball, passed over the head of Johnny Damon in that first game of the Subway Series, when it was you could really sense that the Mets had the upper hand as far as being in New York, as far as New York is concerned. So I have those two memories. I had mentioned the game in DC in 2015. Where just the kind of the pump fist after scoring, and I also think about it wasn't a moment per se, but the fact that he was kind of the ambassador at the All-Star game at Citi Field, I thought made a lot of was really appropriate. He got to bat fourth, and just he kind of was like the unofficial welcomer, if you could say that, to the game at Citi Field. So I thought that was another great memory.
He was pretty good in the All-Star games too.
Yeah, I mean, 2006, he hit that home run to left
in Pittsburgh.
Field, yeah, and in the home run derby before that, which I don't think you might have learned a swing, but yeah, I remember that. I was like, oh, could he beat Ryan Howard? And it didn't turn out that way. So yeah, and then we talked about a lot of the other ones. The World Series home run was obviously great because you're just like the first World Series game at Citi Field. Just it's great that he was able to deliver that home run. I remember him hitting the first Mets home run at Citi Field in 2009.
Yeah.
And you watch that home run and you just get a sense of how just insane the dimensions were, because he crushed the ball and it barely goes over that Great Wall of Flushing. I'm like, what's going on with these fences? It's like he destroyed that baseball. But it was still great because he appropriately delivered the first Mets home run. But it's still I think if anyone shares that on YouTube or on social media, one of the reactions is how did that ball get in the first row? What's going on?
Yeah, the Wilpons smartly making the dimensions more towards Jose Reyes, but then signing David Wright instead, which I always thought was the better move to bring back Wright, who knew that he was going to get spinal stenosis. He was very healthy. He played a lot of games at that time. Jose Reyes was starting to kind of break down a little bit, you saw, and by the time he went to Miami and then what was it, Colorado and Toronto, he was not the same player that he was. For me, some of my favorite moments are kind of a little bit more personal, on the field, off the field. One of them on the field, you mentioned that 2006 game against the Yankees where he hit that big fly ball off of Mariano. Everyone talks about that game so much, but for me it was the Sunday night game. I was in the stadium, packed house. You know how it gets when the Subway Series, both Met fans and Yankee fans going at it with each other, security everywhere. But the Mets were, I think, down, I want to say 2-0. And Carlos Delgado gives the Mets the lead, makes it 3-2 with a 3-run home run. Next comes up David Wright, and he hits an absolute moonshot. I think it left Shea Stadium. I really do. I think it was hit out of the stadium. He hit that. That may have been the farthest home run he has hit. And the Mets ended up winning that game. And, 2006 continued to roll on to the Mets going into the postseason. But a personal one for me off the field was 2005, his first full season there. And after a Mets loss, me and my dad go to the back by the parking lot, seeing if we could get any autographs or any of the players can come out. And a lot of them weren't coming out. David Wright comes out, and he takes a picture and signs for every single person that was standing there, telling you the kind of person that he was. I even still have the picture. I got to pull it up. That's me meeting David Wright in 2005, the beginning of David Wright's long, nice run as a New York Mets. So David Wright will always be remembered as one of the best Mets. And like we mentioned earlier, if there's anyone that's going to have his number retired, as well as being put into the Hall of Fame on the same day, it's going to be David Wright. You have Tom Seaver as the best Mets pitcher of all time. You have David Wright really as the best Mets hitter of all time. And to have those two have those honors, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's very, very appropriate. I mean, your story is I think a lot of people have similar stories of, just meeting him and how nice he was. And I think in another respect, he grew up, in Norfolk, that area near where the AAA franchise was, and grew up a Mets fan, and it's was obviously has been kind of a Met for beyond when he started, when he was drafted in 2001, way before that. So it's we use this word appropriate, but it just feels appropriate that kind of he gets that honor of Hall of Fame and retired number all on the same day, because it's certainly deserved. And another thing, I think of moments, and I think of off the field moments, and the offseason of 2012 to 2013. 2012, he got his contract extension. And that, I forgot exactly how old he was, but I think he was in his 30s. And, there was probably a chance that I'm not saying he was going to leave, but was there a chance that the Mets were going to re-sign him, because that was just a time in which the Mets were not re-signing players to those kind of contracts, considering their financial strains. And was he going to stay there? And I'm going to try to tie this to the way the Mets are, the certain situations the Mets are in now, where you have Juan Soto, who essentially chose the Mets. And I think David Wright had a loyalty to the Mets at a time when it wasn't really, that in to be
not even deserving, really.
Yeah, I mean, he was giving them more credit than they deserved. So I think about that loyalty. He could have easily gone somewhere else. All the other things. It's a sliding doors moment in Mets history, but at the same time, I'm glad he stayed a Met for the rest of his career. Yep. All the other things included, everything that happened after that. And then, before the 2013 season, he was named the captain, joining Keith and Gary and John Franco. So that kind of period was really cemented him in Mets history. I think he was already there. He was, he had all those great seasons early in his career. But this was like just kind of an extra stamp of Mets lore. And he certainly added that a little bit more, but it kind of put him in a special place.
Brian, it's always great to talk to you about Mets history. One of my favorite things to do. It's just, dive back into the past and look at some of the great moments. I mean, we really have to just weed out a lot of the bad that surrounds the Mets. And I think we're going in a good direction when it comes to the future of the New York Mets. But there are a lot of important aspects to this franchise and this organization. Yes, they don't have the playoff experience of being able to go every single year. They haven't gone to that many World Series. But the memories that have been made, the history that has been made is very important to us and very important not only to this franchise, but to the Cohens as well. And it's great to see them and what they have done to really dive deep into the history and help us remember all the good times that this organization has been through.
Yeah, and I think as much as we are looking forward, and we have every reason to be very, very optimistic looking forward to, I mean, the Juan Soto signing, like everyone else, had me very excited. It's also, it's also appropriate and it's also necessary to look back at where the Mets have been. And I think that, and look back at the great moments, and David Wright represents so many great moments and just represents just all that was good about the Mets. Being a guy you could just go, this is the star of my team. And he was the face of the Mets for so long. He was, you don't want to call him the franchise because we have another one, but he was essentially the franchise player for so many years. And the fact that he was a Met for his entire career. And like I said, grew up a Mets fan. It just, I think he deserves his day, and he'll get it on July 19th.
Well, he may not be the franchise, but he will always have the moniker of being the captain, at least one of the captains of this, one of the four captains that the Mets have had in this franchise.